There's a preservation method that keeps cheese perfect for 10 years without electricity, without refrigeration, without a single modern input of any kind. It has been used continuously since Roman times. It costs less than a candle. And the dairy industry built a $14 billion cold chain infrastructure specifically to replace it. Not because the method failed, because the method worked so well that nobody who used it ever needed to buy another refrigerator. The cheese in your refrigerator expires in 3 weeks. The same cheese sealed in wax expires in 10 years. Both facts are true simultaneously. One of them is on your grocery receipt. The other is in the script. Subscribe and hit the bell. The next story opens soon. In the 1st century AD, a Roman agricultural writer named Columella published a 12-volume work called De Re Rustica, the most detailed farming manual of the ancient world. In it, he described the standard method for preserving cheese for long-term storage. Coat the surface in oil mixed with wax. The coating created an airtight seal that prevented the surface from being reached by air. Without air, mold could not grow. Without mold, the cheese remained edible indefinitely while the interior continued its natural aging process. Columella was not documenting a novel technique. He was recording something Roman farms had been doing for generations. Roman soldiers carried wax-sealed cheese on campaigns across 3 continents. The legions that marched from Rome to Britain, from Gaul to Persia, required food that could survive months of travel without refrigeration, without cold storage, without any modern infrastructure. Cheese, sealed in wax, met the requirement completely. It survived the heat of North African summers. It survived the cold of Germanic winters. It survived the humidity of the British Isles. The seal held. The cheese aged. The soldiers ate it. Medieval Dutch traders built one of the most profitable trade networks in European history on the back of a single product: Edam cheese. A hard cheese produced in the Netherlands, formed into a ball, and coated in red wax. The red wax was not decorative. It was a preservation system. Sealed Edam wheels could be loaded onto trading ships in Amsterdam and arrive in markets from England to the Caribbean to the East Indies in perfect condition. The 6-month journey by sea did not touch the cheese inside the wax. The Dutch dairy trade generated wealth that funded the construction of Amsterdam, the development of the Dutch East India Company, and the expansion of a small nation into a global trading power, built on red wax and cows. By the 1600s, the Dutch had standardized the wax coating process across their entire dairy industry. Every wheel of Gouda that left the Netherlands was coated in yellow wax. Every ball of Edam was coated in red. The color was not decoration. It was a grading system. Red meant fresh, yellow meant aged. The wax color communicated the product to buyers who could not open it. A merchant in Lisbon, receiving a shipment of Dutch cheese, knew exactly what he was getting from the color of the wax before he cut the first wheel. Dutch dairy farmers grew wealthy on this system, not because they invented better cheese, because they invented better preservation. French cheese was arguably more flavorful. English cheese had centuries of tradition. But Dutch cheese could travel. Dutch cheese could wait. Dutch cheese arrived in good condition 3 months after leaving Amsterdam, while competitors' products spoiled before reaching the harbor. The competitive advantage was entirely the wax. The wax made the cheese a global commodity. Without the wax, it would have been a local product, eaten within 20 miles of where it was made. This is wax-preserved cheese. The same product that sits in specialty cheese shops today labeled as something rare and artisanal was the standard method for producing and distributing cheese for 2,000 years. The specialty label is not because the method is unusual. It is because the dairy industry spent the last 70 years making it unusual. Here is why the wax works when plastic does not. Mold is aerobic. It requires oxygen to grow. This is not complicated. No oxygen means no mold. Wax applied to the surface of a cheese wheel creates a seal that oxygen cannot penetrate. The mold spores that are present on every surface in every kitchen cannot establish growth on a surface that has no air reaching it. They land on the wax. They find no oxygen. They do not grow. Inside the wax seal, beneficial bacteria continue working. Lactobacillus strains that are responsible for the complex flavors of aged cheese do not require oxygen. They continue breaking down proteins and fats, developing the sharpness, nuttiness, and complexity that make aged cheese worth paying for. The wax does not stop aging. It stops spoiling. The 2 processes happen simultaneously in a waxed cheese. Good bacteria age the interior. Wax prevents external contamination. The result, after 10 years, is a cheese more flavorful than any 3-week refrigerator product the modern dairy industry produces. The optimal temperature for aging wax cheese is between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. A cool basement, a root cellar, a wine cellar, a shaded storage room in a temperate climate. This is not an accident. Before mechanical refrigeration existed, every house with a basement had storage space that naturally maintained this temperature range year-round. The Earth maintains a constant temperature below the frost line. Early American settlers stored waxed cheese in their root cellars alongside apples and root vegetables. No electricity, no running cost, no $200 appliance to replace every 10 years. Modern refrigerators maintain temperatures between 35 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit. This is actually too cold for optimal cheese aging. At refrigerator temperatures, the beneficial bacteria that develop cheese flavor slow dramatically. The texture becomes rubbery rather than complex. The flavor development that comes from weeks and months of aging stops. Modern supermarket cheese does not taste like aged cheese because it is kept too cold, wrapped in a material that allows air exchange, and sold before it is aged properly. The wax method, stored at basement temperature, produces better cheese than the cold chain produces, not by a small margin, by a decade of flavor development. Now follow the money. Sealed Air Corporation. Revenue, $5.5 billion per year. They manufacture Cryovac, the dominant plastic packaging system used by dairy producers worldwide. Every block of plastic-wrapped cheese in every grocery store in America passes through their packaging systems. The machinery costs millions. The plastic film costs per meter. Every sale is recurring. Every package requires replacement film. Every cheese that expires and is thrown away requires a new package. The global dairy cold chain generates $14 billion per year. Refrigerated trucks, temperature-controlled warehouses. The energy costs to maintain continuous cold from farm to supermarket shelf. The refrigerator in your home that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, consuming electricity to maintain a temperature that is actually suboptimal for the cheese inside it. USDA studies estimate that 35 to 40% of all cheese purchased in the United States is thrown away before being eaten. That is approximately 4 billion pounds of cheese per year. Discarded. The plastic wrap allowed air in. The mold grew. The sell-by date passed. The household threw it away. Each discarded block is a new purchase. Each new purchase feeds the cold chain. Each cold chain transaction is revenue for the packaging company, the refrigerated truck company, the temperature-controlled warehouse, the grocery store refrigeration system, and the refrigerator running in your kitchen. The 35% waste rate is not a failure of the system. It is the system working as designed. A product that lasts 3 weeks and is partially thrown away generates more transactions per year than a product that lasts 10 years and generates no waste. The wax method generates essentially zero waste. A waxed wheel of cheese is opened when it is fully needed, consumed completely, and replaced only when the household chooses to buy more cheese. The grocery store cannot build a $14 billion cold chain on a customer who wastes nothing and replaces nothing on a 3-week cycle. That is nearly half of every block of cheese leaving the grocery store. Thrown away. Because it molded. Because the expiration date passed. Because the plastic wrap did not keep the surface from contacting air. Because the product was designed to have a 3-week lifespan that requires regular replacement. Wax-sealed cheese does not mold. It does not expire in 3 weeks. It does not require replacement on a schedule that sustains a $14 billion infrastructure. A household that waxes its own cheese buys cheese far less frequently, stores it without electricity, wastes almost none of it, and pays nothing to a cold chain. That household is not a good customer for the dairy packaging industry. The industry knows this. The transition from wax to plastic was not driven by consumer preference. No household in 1950 complained that their waxed cheese lasted too long. No farmer asked for a packaging material that reduced shelf life. The transition was driven by industrial scale and speed. Plastic wrapping machines process cheese blocks faster than wax coating processes. Plastic is cheaper per unit than wax at industrial volume. The cold chain infrastructure required to keep plastic-wrapped cheese from spoiling was built by and for the companies that manufactured the packaging machinery and the refrigeration equipment. The consumer got shorter shelf life, higher food waste, and an electricity bill. The industry got recurring revenue. The sell-by dates on your cheese are not safety dates. This is documented by the USDA and FDA both. Sell-by dates are manufacturer-recommended dates that indicate optimal quality, not safety cutoffs. Cheese that is consumed after the sell-by date is not automatically unsafe. A properly stored hard cheese like cheddar or Gouda can be consumed weeks past its sell-by date if it shows no visible mold. The date exists because the packaging degrades, not because the cheese does. The packaging is the problem. The wax is the solution. Here's how you apply it. One additional note before the practical instructions. The cheese you buy from a grocery store for waxing should ideally be fresh. Not already old, not already showing signs of surface aging. Wax seals in the current state of the cheese. If the cheese is already developing off flavors from improper plastic wrap storage, the wax will preserve those off flavors. Start with fresh cheese for the best result. If you are buying specifically to age, buy the youngest version of a hard cheese you can find. A young cheddar aged 6 months that you wax yourself and age for another 2 years at basement temperature will outperform any commercially produced 2-year aged cheddar sold in plastic wrap. The commercial product was aged in a temperature-controlled facility with controlled humidity and the economics of large-scale production. Your basement-aged waxed wheel will have developed more complexity because it aged at the optimal temperature with natural humidity variation. This is why artisan-aged cheese costs 4 times what supermarket-aged cheese costs. The method produces a genuinely superior product. Buy hard cheese, cheddar, Gouda, Manchego, Edam, Gruyere, Parmesan. These varieties have low moisture content and age well under wax. Soft cheeses and high moisture varieties like mozzarella or ricotta do not benefit from wax preservation and should not be waxed. The technique is for hard and semi-hard cheeses only. Dry the cheese surface completely before waxing. Any surface moisture trapped under the wax will become a site for anaerobic bacterial growth that produces off flavors. Pat the surface dry with paper towels. Let the cheese sit uncovered at room temperature for 30 minutes to ensure surface dryness. Buy cheese wax. It is available from home brewing suppliers, cheese-making supply companies, and online retailers. Approximately $10 per pound. 1 pound of wax coats 15 to 20 pounds of cheese. The wax is formulated to be flexible rather than brittle. It will not crack when the cheese expands and contracts with temperature changes. Do not substitute regular paraffin wax. It cracks. Beeswax works as a substitute and has been used historically. Melt the wax in a double boiler to approximately 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not overheat. Dip the cheese into the melted wax using tongs or a fork inserted into the rind. Rotate the cheese to coat all surfaces. Remove it. Hold it above the pot for 30 seconds while the wax hardens. The first coat should be thin and even. Let it harden completely. Approximately 3 minutes. Apply a second coat using the same method. 2 coats are sufficient for most cheeses. 3 coats for cheeses intended for very long aging. Mark the wax with a permanent marker. The variety. The date. Let the final coat harden completely before storing. Store waxed cheese at 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. A basement or root cellar is ideal. A cool garage in winter works. A wine refrigerator set to 50 degrees works. A standard refrigerator works but is cooler than optimal. Turn the cheese over once per month to prevent moisture from pooling at the bottom. Inspect the wax surface monthly for cracks. If a crack appears, melt a small amount of wax and brush it over the crack with a pastry brush. The seal must remain complete. The cheese will age inside the wax. This is the point. Not just preservation. Active aging. The best aged cheeses in the world are wax-aged. The complexity you pay triple for at an artisan cheese counter came from time inside a wax seal, not from a refrigerator, not from a factory. After 6 months, it will taste noticeably different than the day it was sealed. After 1 year, it will taste better than anything sold as aged cheese at a grocery store. After 3 years, it will have developed complexity that cannot be commercially produced at scale. After 10 years, it will be something most people alive today have never tasted because the industrial dairy system has not produced aged and waxed cheese at supermarket scale for 2 generations. The Roman legions knew this. The Dutch trading ships knew this. The colonial American households that kept winter provisions in their root cellars knew this. The knowledge was not erased by a law or a ban or an executive order. It was replaced by infrastructure. A $14 billion infrastructure that needs you to have a refrigerator, to buy plastic-wrapped cheese every 2 to 3 weeks, and to throw away the third that molds before you finish it. The wax costs $10. The cheese costs what it costs. The basement already exists. The turning takes 30 seconds per month. And the product at the end is something the dairy industry cannot produce at scale, cannot profit from your making, and would rather you never discovered you could make yourself. The infrastructure that replaced this method is not going anywhere. The cold chain is embedded in every grocery store, every distribution center, every dairy farm that has reorganized its operations around plastic packaging and refrigerated transport. Unwinding that infrastructure is not a realistic outcome. But your kitchen does not require the infrastructure to unwind. Your basement does not require the cold chain to change. Your $10 of cheese wax does not require permission from Sealed Air Corporation or the Dairy Lobby or the USDA. The question is not whether the system will change. It will not. The question is whether you will participate in the system on terms that require you to throw away a third of every product you buy on a 3-week expiration schedule designed around packaging limitations. Or whether you will use a method that Roman farmers documented, Dutch traders refined, colonial households maintained, and artisan cheesemakers still practice today because it produces a better product at a fraction of the cost with zero waste. Columella wrote the instructions in the 1st century. They still work. They have always worked. They will work this weekend if you decide to try them. Subscribe and hit the bell. The next story opens soon.